but these are investment assets. It can be cash, stocks, bonds. Inside of an investment account, you can pledge those and borrow against that value.
Welcome to the Freedom Point Real Estate Podcast, where we talk about creating more time freedom through passive real estate investing. Passive investing in real estate challenges conventional investment wisdom. We are passionate about learning and sharing resources with others who are ready to transform their investing mindset.
Quick disclaimer that I am not a CPA, attorney, or financial advisor. My thoughts and opinions expressed in this podcast are provided for education and informational purposes only. My views are from being a successful business owner, entrepreneur, and real estate professional for over 20 years.
I'm glad you're here. Now let's dig in.
Hello and welcome to the Freedom Point Podcast. I am excited for you to join us today. My name is Drew McWilliams and I will be your host. Today, my guest is Ben Semmes, whom is the Vice President at Morgan Stanley Wealth Management and team. Today, we're going to be discussing creative ways to finance real estate transactions and other real estate options. So, Ben, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Drew. Great to be here.
Yeah, really looking forward. I've known Ben for a long time, and I'm excited to give you a little bio and background on Ben and then tell you why we haven't been on our show today for some learning opportunities. Ben joined Morgan Stanley in June of 2022 after spending 10 years at Merrill Lynch Wealth Management. He works with high net worth individuals and families with a customized approach to wealth building, minimizing taxes, and preserving assets to build family legacies. Ben holds designations as a certified financial planner, accredited wealth management advisor, and qualified plan fiduciary advisor. And Ben and his wife reside in Northern Virginia. Ben, how did I do? Did I get everything right? Fill in any gaps that I might have missed and what you're working on these days.
You did. You got my bio pretty sound. I would say, recently we've been really focused on taxes. That's top of mind for all clients right now. So we're trying to find the best ways to, one, coordinate with their accountants, and two, make sure they have all the tax documents they need. So that's always from now until, tax filing deadline. That's the biggest thing we're helping clients with right now. So.
Oh, I love that. So audience, here's why we had Ben on today. Ben has been my family's financial advisor for over a decade now. And Ben very much knows I am very active in real estate, very active in multifamily investing, which is probably the complete opposite side of the coin. I believe in diversification. Ben, I'm probably sure you can appreciate that. But whenever I talk about real estate to Ben, he was mentioning all these different ways to leverage and buy real estate that I've never heard of in 25 years being in the business. And immediately I go, Ben, time out. Before you tell me anything, I'm going to make you be on a podcast with me and do a recording, because if I'm going to learn something new, I want you to be able to help the audience and equally teach them at the same time. So Ben, I am now ready for all your tips and tricks to see if I can utilize this selfishly for myself and maybe our audience too.
And for the audience to know, that's exactly how that went down. That's exactly what Drew said to me. So he is not kidding when it comes to that. But all jokes aside, happy to go through this first part with you, which we're going to talk about securities-based line of credit, which is a way to leverage a portfolio for to be able to have liquidity to purchase anything. It doesn't have to be real estate. I just have a lot of clients that do use it for real estate purchases. And the general way that this works is you are pledging your investment assets, non-retirement. Now, they cannot be in retirement accounts, so it can't be in a 401k or an IRA, but these are investment assets. It can be cash, stocks, bonds. Inside of an investment account, you can pledge those and borrow against that value. Reason why that's really important is a number of different reasons. One, instead of having to sell those assets, stocks and bonds and your portfolio, and potentially have taxes that are due by doing that, right? When you sell in an account like that, you do have to owe capital gains taxes. And some people, for a lot of my wealthy clients, that can be They could have Apple that has $1 million in capital gains, right? They do not want to sell that position, but they do want to leverage those assets they have to be able to go and purchase other things or live off that money in different ways. And so they will pledge the portfolio and borrow against it as a line of credit. And that actually gives them pure liquidity to be able to do anything they want with it. And there's a couple of really huge advantages to using a securities-based line of credit. And these can be used at pretty much all of the big investment banks. So Merrill Lynch had a version of this called an LMA. Morgan Stanley has one called the LAL. Everyone has a different thing they call it. But what it is generally is a securities-based line of credit. So one of the huge benefits to this is it's really easy to set up, right? And instead of having to do a mortgage or go through that whole process, I know all of you real estate investors can know how bad that is, right? Setting up getting a mortgage or even doing a home equity line of credit is a pain these days. With a securities-based line of credit, it's a really quick credit pull that the bank does against your portfolio, and they set it up. It can be set up, at least at Morgan Stanley, within 24 hours. And typically what they're going to give you is based on the type of investments you have in your investment account. They give you basically a credit allowance based on the value of those. So for stocks, they're going to give you an advance rate on the value of your stocks of about 50 to 60% of the value of your stocks. So if you have $1 million in stocks, they're going to give you a credit line of about $500,000 to tap into. Now, if you have bonds, you can borrow more like 70, 75% of the value of bonds. And with cash, it goes up to 95% of the value of cash. So just as a broad way of thinking about it, if you think about the size of your portfolio, you can usually borrow about half the value of your portfolio. And based on the size of the portfolio and the credit facility that comes with that, that's where the line of credit cost comes from, right? How much, if you start borrowing on this line of credit, do you owe? What are the rates to that, right? And the way the line of, once it's open and set up, it's an open line of credit, and you don't actually owe anything on it until you start borrowing on it. You can write checks; it's as good as cash. I've had clients buy cars on there. I've had clients buy, houses, buy, fix up houses to flip. But the way that it works is it is a variable rate product, much like a HELOC is, and it credits on a daily balance. Basically, it accrues interest on a daily balance, and it is tied to the secured overnight financing rate average. Sorry, SOFR is what that's called. And so what they do is they have a base rate plus a spread on it based on the size of your account. So the base rate right now is right around 5%, and depending on the size of the credit line, it would be anywhere a tack on of about 2%, anywhere up to maybe 4%. So all in on that variable line of credit, you're looking at a rate right now anywhere from about 6 all the way up to about 9% right now that you'd be borrowing at. And the nice thing about this credit line is that it just accrues interest every day. And if you borrow from that credit line, there's no prepayment penalty. So you can pay this off as fast or as slow as you want, and you don't actually have to make regular payments on this line of credit. It's just going to accrue interest on the balance. The balance will just keep going up as you have it on a daily basis. So you want to pay it down. You don't really want to let it go forever. This is not a vehicle that you would use for really long-term financing, right? If you're going to own a house for a really long time, you're usually going to want to do a mortgage in that case. But this is a great facility that I've had for clients to pick up a house to flip if they need to do a bunch of, updates to the house before they flip it. Maybe they buy the house with the line of credit and they also do the updates. And then when they sell it, boom, they use the cash, some of the cash to pay off the line of credit. And there's no prepayment penalties or anything like that. You basically get to just move in and out of cash, and you're just accruing interest on a daily basis on the account. And again, you don't have to sell any of your investment assets to do this. There's no taxes at all due from any of these transactions. So that's a really high level look at what a securities-based line of credit is. And this is something that some of our wealthiest clients use for pretty much across the board for all different kinds of solutions, real estate. In fact, if you ever hear about really wealthy people, maybe like CEOs or a Bezos or maybe an Elon Musk, they actually, a lot of them live a majority of their lifestyle off of lines of credit like this. Now, given they all have many billions of dollars, so they're borrowing at a much different negotiated rate with the bank than maybe we would on this type of product. But that's one of the reasons why CEOs of those massive companies rarely ever take a salary, right? If they don't take a salary, you might wonder, well, how are they living? What are they living on? There's no income, right? If they're just taking stock, how are they living off of that? And the way it's happening is that they are borrowing against that stock. They go to the bank and say, hey, I'm going to pledge this $10 billion worth of Amazon stock. Give me a credit facility and I'll live off that credit. And it's tax free. They don't have to sell the Amazon stock. And the bank is winning on it too, because they're charging a little interest markup on it. So the bank is okay with it, and they know they're good for the money because it's secured by the Amazon stock. Worst case scenario, they said that Amazon stock has to be sold and it pays back the line of credit. And so that's a way that very, very wealthy, the upper echelon, is able to live on securities-based lines of credit. Now, I do not recommend doing that for the normal average Joe, but I have had some elderly clients, in their 80s, who have very large embedded gains, and they need access to liquidity. Maybe it's for, they're going into a nursing home and the beneficiaries have control, and they don't want to be creating these big capital gains because it could kick them into higher Medicare. It could cause issues with their healthcare. And so a lot of times we'll open a line of credit on an older client and use the line of credit. And then when the client passes away, the estate then sells the stock, because you got to step up in cost basis, sells the stocks, pays back the line of credit, and there is no capital gains due by doing that. So it is a way to stretch out using liquidity against a portfolio. So that is a really high level view of a securities-based line of credit. There is one drawback and something to think about, and you have to be a little careful when you're borrowing on a securities-based line of credit. It works much like a margin account does, which is a similar facility, but a margin account is used to buy stocks. In this way, if you have a maintenance level that you cannot go above. So you cannot borrow above the 50% of your equities value, let's just say, that the bank is allowing you to go to. So there's a maximum credit level that fluctuates with the value of your portfolio. Let's just say you were to borrow all the way up to that limit. You're allowed to borrow $500,000. You borrow $500,000, but the stock market takes a turn and drops 20%. Now your allowable credit limit has also dropped by about 20%. And now you're owing more than the bank is allowing you to borrow. That'll trigger what's called a maintenance call. And that can be bad for a number of reasons, where they may have to sell stock to pay down your line to bring it back in line, or you may have to bring in additional capital requirements. So when I talk to people about using this, I always tell them, we are not going to be borrowing all that risk all the way up to what they're allowing you to borrow. We have to be a little careful there, right? Also depends on what your portfolio is made of. If you're 100% in technology stocks, you got to be more careful than maybe if you're 50% bonds, 50% stocks. But that's just something to keep in mind. That's why this is not necessarily something that you want to leverage all the way up to the allowable credit limit, because it can cause a maintenance call if the market were to take a turn one way or the other.
Wow, that's a great wealth of information. So a couple questions based on what you just said there. First of all, I think the big takeaway is and correct me if I'm wrong, the ultra wealthy, right? The massive CEO examples that you used, they're not going to take a salary, because if they took a salary, it would automatically kick them into probably like a 36% tax bracket. Where if they just did it this way, and then, they're 6 or 8% of whatever that interest rate is. And for the audience to know, we're making this recording in the first quarter of 2024. That's why the interest rates are the examples of what we're using right now. And that's going to be another question I have. So them paying that 6 or 8%, or with the billions they have, probably a much lower rate, that seems like a no-brainer. Would I rather pay 6% or would I rather pay 36%? So that's interesting information. That makes sense to me. Second is, I'm assuming, because I know you work with pretty, ultra wealthy people, this seems like it's a better strategy in a lower interest rate environment compared to what we're currently experiencing
Mhm.
present day. Is that an accurate statement?
It's very accurate. Yes. And, rewind 24 months,
Wow.
and most of the lines of credit were right around 1-2%. Some people were borrowing at a 0.5% on a
Wow.
liquidity access line. Now, in fairness, the Federal Reserve had rates at zero,
Right.
right? And the rate that the Federal Reserve is controlling is pretty closely tied to SOFR, right? It's the overnight rate that the Fed is controlling, and SOFR is essentially exactly that. So I don't want to go where I think you're heading with the next question. But yes, we expect the Federal Reserve to potentially begin cutting. At least they've told us they're going to begin cutting rates this year. Now, the market seems to think that the Fed's going to start cutting in March. We don't agree with that. We agree. We think that the Fed's going to keep it higher for a little bit longer. And what that means is maybe not cutting in March, but likely more like middle of the year, June or July, they'll begin cutting rates. And that will bring down the rates that you would be borrowing on the securities based line of credit. So it may drop from, the spread was between, 6 and 9. That may come down to 8 and 5 and then continue on drop. We're expecting maybe 1.25% in cuts this year. So that could bring that rate down. And since this product is a floating rate, if you have a balance on that, that rate changes
Yeah.
daily and can move down daily as well.
So 24 months to today, were you seeing a much higher volume of people doing these programs? I mean, how drastic has that shift been 24 months ago to now with this type of program?
Interestingly enough, the people that are using it, it didn't really have a massive impact, because even if they're borrowing at 6%, it's slightly higher or kind of in line with what a mortgage would be on an
Mhm.
investment property anyway. And so the way that they're looking at it is, if it's a shorter term investment that they're maybe flipping, they would rather have the ability to, be nimble and stroke a check for a house and whatever they need to do on the house, than have to go through a mortgage process to save, 1 or 2% on a mortgage that they're having to go through and get, combed over and go through that whole process. What I did have a very big increase in was, as rates were moving up, another feature of this product is that the bank will allow you to fix the rate. And so what we did for our clients was, as we knew the Fed was going to start raising rates, as soon as they signaled that, we went to our clients that had balances on SBLs and said, "Hey, look, what is your plan for this SBL? How quickly are you planning to pay this off? Is this a year? Is it a 2 year? Where are we?" And what we were able to do is go to our bank, Morgan Stanley, and fix that LAL for a certain number of time. And that can be, they'll do 6 months, they'll do 1 year, 2 years, they'll even go all the way up to 5 years. They'll fix the rate. And, they tack on a little extra to fix the rate for whatever the years are, but they lock that rate in for that amount of time. Now, the drawback to that is that you do have a prepayment penalty if you pay it off before that term. But what we were doing is saying, if this client is expecting to sell this house in 18 months, they're going to have to go through and do a big redevelopment on the house. 18 months, what we would do is we would fix it for a year. So we locked in a rate at 1.5%. And then it started floating after that year was done. And then they had 6 months of floating where the rate moved up to the floating rate. And then boom, they paid it off. And so
Mhm.
that's something that we were able to do. And we did a lot of that as rates were moving up. And now what we're doing is, we have a lot of people that are out of the fixed rates. And so we're sort of waiting for rates to come back down. And so everyone's kind of anticipating rates coming back down so that the interest credited is much lower here. Hopefully in the next probably 18 months, you'll see rates coming much further down as the Fed lowers them.
Yeah, interesting. One last question, then I know you've
Mhm.
got kind of another kind of subject matter for us to
Yeah.
dive into today. So would you say that rates for HELOCs are pretty close to these securities? I mean, are they pretty hand in hand here?
Yeah, they're pretty close when
Okay.
I look at them. The difference is with a HELOC, the benefit to the HELOC is that you do get to write off the interest on a HELOC if it's used for real estate.
Hmm.
And so that is a benefit of the HELOC. You cannot write off interest on a securities-based line of credit. So that's just something to note, right? They are very close. The main difference is one's this home equity line, much harder to set up, but the rates are very close to each other. And then with the home equity line, you can also write off the interest on your taxes.
And on the security note, you can let your stock grow and appreciate, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like
Yeah.
speed, like you said, you can do it in almost 24 hours. So the speed of accessing capital
Yeah.
seems quick. So pros and cons, audience, right? So different
Mm-hmm.
options out there. That one I didn't know existed, but I definitely think a lower interest rate environment would make it more appealing for sure. All right, second
Absolutely.
topic, Ben,
Mm-hmm.
to dive into. You mentioned something to me called a real estate IRA. What is
Mm-hmm.
that? Unpack that a little bit for us.
Yeah. Yeah. So a real estate IRA, this is not actually something that I can offer at Morgan Stanley, or most wirehouses actually do not do these. A real estate IRA is just like a normal IRA for you, right? You have a custodian that holds the retirement assets for your benefit. But in this type of IRA, you have to find a self-directed custodian. So there are special custodians that will do this for you because they have to be able to do the transaction of buying and selling real estate. And they also have to do kind of the accounting part of holding this in your IRA account. But really, what it allows you to do is buy an investment property inside of a retirement account for your benefit. And there are pros and cons to this. And for real estate investors, it's good to know both, because I do hear real estate IRA brought up with a lot of my real estate clients about whether or not we can do something like this. One, let's go through the kind of the pros of it first. Obviously, owning real estate in an IRA is nice because when you sell real estate, you do not have to worry about any capital gains at all. So you have an investment property, you put it in the IRA. If you sell it, there are no taxes at all. And your IRA receives the funds directly. That's wonderful. Also, any income that is earned, rent from the investment property, goes directly into the IRA. You're not taxed on any of that money at all because it's going into a retirement account for you. So you're not getting taxed at all on anything that's going on. Now, you will get taxed when you take the money out of the IRA if it's a traditional IRA. If it is a Roth IRA, you would not get taxed on the money when you took it out. So it would be completely tax-free the whole way around. Those are some of the benefits of the real estate IRA. Some drawbacks that could be kind of major for real estate investors to think about is you cannot use financing in an IRA. So you cannot go out and get a mortgage and use the IRA funds to do that. It has to be a fully cash transaction. So that is a big one. You're losing your leverage in a real estate deal by doing it in an IRA. That's kind of one major drawback. The other one is you cannot deduct expenses, and you also cannot depreciate the real estate inside the IRA. So you lose that as well on your taxes. But remember, it's in there, so it's already, everything's tax-free in there already. The other part of that is that all of the maintenance and everything has to be paid from the IRA dollars. So you need to have enough money in there to not only pay for the house, but also for any maintenance through the year. So it's important to remember that, because what could happen is if you had $500,000 in an IRA and used all of it to buy a property, and all of a sudden you had to fix some things in the house or redo a basement or something in there flooded, you have to pay it out of the IRA. And if there's not enough money in the IRA, then you might have to force money into the IRA, and the IRS would hammer you for that because you're not allowed to over contribute to an IRA. So those are some of the drawbacks of the IRA. Obviously, the benefits are great because you can buy and sell as much as you want in an IRA, and you don't have to worry about capital gains, and any income earned goes right into a retirement account for you as well. So that is a high level kind of overview of the way that a real estate IRA works. And I think it is an interesting solution, but I think for most real estate investors, I think the biggest drawback is not being able to use leverage, because that's your greatest weapon, right, in real estate, in my opinion, unless maybe you're in an area that has extremely high growth.
Right. Yeah. Well, thanks for unpacking that other option. I think
Mm-hmm.
a lot of folks that listen to us are pretty familiar with my partner and I, Jeremy Dyer, talk, about real estate syndications and investment through syndications. And, one benefit that, I'll talk about for syndications is we do get that depreciation because we're investing into a single asset at a time and not into, a fund. So that's also one more thing. And I'm familiar. I've had a couple people do, that the IRA rollover to a self-directed IRA to be able to do that type of investment. So I'm glad you unpacked that as an
Yeah.
option for that as well. So I think that's a great option. The great thing, Ben, about those self-directed IRAs is whether someone wants to invest with you in Wall Street or through syndications on Main Street with us, you can still use that as an option.
Yeah.
Last question. Tell me some highs, lows, and what you've learned along the way in your journey.
Ooh, some high. I'll get the high first. Let's start there. I would say high for us is this year, 2024, we got named to the Forbes Best in State list, ranked number 26 in Virginia. Our team did, and so that just was really awesome to, all the work we put in and how hard we work for clients was recognized by Forbes. So I would say that's definitely a high for us and my team. I would say lows in the professional journey was, Merrill Lynch, when I worked there, being bought by Bank of America was a tough scene. I'm sure there's no love lost for Bank of America. There's not for me. And hey, it's a big bank, and working there as I worked for 10 years, it slowly became more and more like a big Bank of America bank. And so ultimately, that's why in 2022, I decided to move my practice to Morgan Stanley, which is much more friendly for wealth management clients. And I would say that's probably the low so far in the career. So not too bad. Balances out a high and a low. And then your last question was, what am I working on
you've
now?
learned? Yeah, what you learned along the way.
Ooh, what have I learned? What I've learned along the way with my clients is just that if you go out of your way to provide fantastic service in any job or any career that you're in, and you truly just put the client's interest above you as your fiduciary for your clients, then no matter what, you're going to be successful in what you do. And I think that goes a long way in life too, right? If you just make sure that you take care of people the way that you want to be treated by them too, it's almost like the golden rule, then you always come out ahead in the end. And I think that is probably the number one thing for me, is that just by doing a good job for my clients, that's how we are able to get referrals and grow our business. And I think that's the most exciting part about our job is when people trust sending family members to us to help. And I think I can't say there's anything better than that.
I love that. Well, I can give you a personal testimony that our family loves working with you for the last decade, and have already started to introduce my children to you as well at a young age, which is amazing. So,
yeah,
Ben, thanks for joining us today. If our audience wants to connect with you, what's the best way?
Yeah, I would say the best way is you can actually connect through our website. If you go on and pretty quickly Google Ben Semmes, Semmes, and Morgan Stanley, it'll pull up our webpage. Also, you can look for the BMP group of Morgan Stanley, and you'll be able to pull up right there, and you can send us a note straight through there. Or you can just give me an email directly, benjamin.semmes@morganstanley.com, and I will be happy to field any questions that anyone has, or anything else that I can help out with.
Well, Ben, thank you for joining us today. Greatly appreciate all the nuggets of wisdom you're able to help me with, that I learned something new. Also, our audience. And if anyone in our audience would like to learn more, either from Ben, please reach out to him. His contact information will be in our show notes. Or if you'd like to learn more about passive investing through real estate, please feel free to reach out to us at startingpointcapital.com, and we will see you next time. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for hanging out with us today and for listening to the Freedom Point podcast, powered by Starting Point Capital. This show is for entertainment purposes only. Nothing said on this show should be considered financial advice. Before making any financial decision, please consult with a professional. This show is copyrighted by the Freedom Point podcast. Written permissions must be granted before syndication or rebroadcasting. If you're interested in connecting, you can find contact information at startingpointcapital.com.